thought they're members of a group called Evil Plotters. For all that and more with Andrea Jenkyns and Butler, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Now we're told Brexit is done. Boris Johnson fought a whole election on the premise of getting Brexit done, and now that it really definitely is completely done, no one wants to talk about it anymore. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer both want to move on because, as I said, Brexit is definitely done. Apart from, it's not really done, is it? Just look at what's happening today in Northern Ireland. Finally, after 2 years, it looks like power sharing is about to be restored and there could be a functioning government again. But the reason for the collapse hasn't been resolved. Where do you put the post-Brexit border between the EU and the UK? On the island of Ireland? Down the Irish Sea? And this is a problem that hasn't been and maybe can never be resolved. And it's not the only outstanding thing on the Brexit to-do list either. For many, the reason for voting to leave the EU was to gain control of our borders and, frankly, to bring down net migration. But today, the Office for National Statistics has projected the UK population will grow to 74 million in the next decade or so, including an extra 6.1 million people through net migration. So if Brexit was about controlling our borders, well, that hasn't been done either. Whether it's those long-promised international trade deals, a low-tax economy, freedom from the grip of European courts, or even something as simple as working out where our trade borders are, nearly 8 years on, it's hard to see how Brexit has been completed. You know, if it was a computer game, I'm not really sure we'd even be at the boss level yet. We'll be discussing all of this throughout the programme. First, though, here is our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins.
They arrived in 2 cars, but they're now preparing to form one government. The DUP leader's deal to restore power sharing has paved the way for Michelle O'Neill to become Northern Ireland's first nationalist First Minister.
I welcome that. That's exactly where we all should be. This is what goes to the heart of the Good Friday Agreement. Power sharing is the only show in town. So I'm finally glad that we're getting to a juncture where actually that may be possible once again. But then it's about beyond that, what do we do next?
It's a defining moment for unionism, holding out the prospect of devolution within days. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says the UK government will table legislation addressing his concerns about the Brexit border in the Irish Sea.
Some people said you're going to take the green lane and paint it red, white and blue and put a flag on it. Well, if someone wants to put a flag on it, whatever. But as far as we are concerned, the green lane will go and be replaced by the UK internal market system.
So Geoffrey Donaldson says this deal means there will be 0 checks on goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland and remaining here, and that EU law will no longer apply automatically in this part of the United Kingdom. But those claims will be tested against the legislation once it's published. The breakthrough came after 5 hours of talks on a night of high drama for the DUP. Protests outside overshadowed by a leak from inside. Jamie Bryson, a loyalist activist, posted a running commentary online from a source attending the meeting. How did you breach the security of the DUP?
Well, I didn't. I think the DUP breached their own security, I have to say.
There is some suggestion that someone in that meeting was wearing a wire. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I wouldn't ask you who your sources are, how you obtain them.
The Northern Ireland Secretary briefed the Cabinet but hasn't released the details yet. He had already pledged £3.3 billion of support to any new Stormont administration.
I believe that all the conditions are now in place for the Assembly to return, and I look forward very much to the restoration of the institutions at Stormont as soon as possible.
2 years without a government here has fuelled a crisis in Northern Ireland's public services. 10 days ago, 170,000 workers took to the streets to demand a pay rise. Marie Irwin was one of them.
The morale in Northern Ireland has hugely suffered. It has been hugely impacted. People have no belief in our government anymore. People are sad, and I think mental health levels have risen hugely in this small country, and I do think that that has a direct impact to us not having a government up and running.
Endless talk about borders only adds to the challenge of power sharing. But if this deal sticks, Northern Ireland could have a new government by the weekend, and it's Rishi Sunak who'll have got Brexit done. David Blevins, Sky News at Stormont.
Well, let's talk now to Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, shall we? Sam, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because we haven't actually seen the deal that apparently has been done.
Yeah, it was a completely bizarre, rather topsy-turvy day. We had the Northern Ireland Secretary come out earlier and tell us that he was delighted a deal was done, but we weren't allowed to see it. And we haven't seen the details of the legal text. All of that is going to come tomorrow. What appears to have happened is the UK and the EU have agreed, quite simply, that there will be less checks, almost no checks, on goods going from Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or at least that's what the DUP is saying, and a document released jointly by the UK and the EU suggests today. But actually, of course, with all of this stuff, the devil is in the detail. And I understand that even the EU don't quite know what we or the British government is going to release tomorrow. So these things are never totally done until they're done. And there is a little bit of residual nervousness tonight, despite all of the optimism.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because it is worth, I guess, just pausing to reflect what a big deal this is. If this gets through, if it works, if Stormont's up and running, I mean, that's going to be a huge deal for the Prime Minister, for Rishi Sunak, as well as people in Northern Ireland.
Almost 2 years the people of Northern Ireland have not had government, and that nation has effectively been run by civil servants. So this will be a big achievement by Rishi Sunak. Actually, the whole Windsor framework process may end up being his biggest legacy, which is quite something, might surprise some people in his own party, that the guy that struck a deal in Northern Ireland is very important. And to get there, he's dug into his pocket and found £3.3 billion to sort this out, to sort out Northern Ireland, to get the parties to the table, to sort out the DUP and get them back in Stormont. I just slightly wonder whether there are other parts of the United Kingdom that wouldn't mind some of that money as well, or as on top of it, as Rishi Sunak does something very controversial, which is to change the formula that underlies how money is handed out to different nations of the United Kingdom. But here you have a Prime Minister also who is about to press the button on an assembly reforming with a Sinn Féin First Minister. The moment of history is not just the resumption of the Stormont Assembly, if that's what's happened next week. For the first time ever, an assembly that was designed, a government that was built never to allow Republicans, nationalists to take the top spot. Now that is exactly what is about to happen. It is hard to overstate just how momentous it's going to be in Northern Ireland if, as we expect, that happens next week.
Yeah, absolutely right. We're going to be hearing from the president of Sinn Féin, Mary Lou McDonald, later. She tells me that as Sam says, in her view, the days of Irish partition, as she puts it, are numbered. Sam, thank you very much for explaining the significance of today's events. I've got a bit of breaking news to bring you now, and it's about a shooting in Southwark that happened, a fatal shooting of the man in Southwark, because the Independent Office for Police Conduct has issued an update on circumstances of the killing of that man this morning. They've released information that among the weapons found at the scene were crossbows, a knife, a sword and a hatchet. So all of those weapons found at the scene. They also said that they established from police call logs that officers were called to the house just before 5 in the morning. It was following several reports of a man trying to force entry into the house. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. But weapons on that scene: crossbows, a knife, a sword and a hatchet. Well, let's go back to Northern Ireland now. A little earlier, I spoke to the chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee and former Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland. So finally, it feels like power sharing could be restored.
Yes, it does. I think last night's statement was significant, not just from the leadership of Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, but the fact that the DUP have a collective position now, an agreed position, to come back into the executive and the assembly. That's good news for Northern Ireland communities, and it's good news for democracy in Northern Ireland. And I think we should welcome this news very warmly.
One thing that helped get it over the line was £3.3 billion from the UK government. We've obviously seen strikes in Northern Ireland with public sector workers unhappy at their pay. How is it then that the government's managed to find £3.3 billion non-inflationary down the back of a sofa to help strikes in Northern Ireland, but they can't do the same in hospitals and on railways in the rest of the UK?
Well, look, I think to be fair, there is a package there within that overall settlement that can bring Northern Irish public sector workers up to the sort of pay levels that we're seeing in the rest of the UK. And I think that, rightly, it's for the executive in Stormont to deal with those issues now. That opportunity has been created. It's a big offer. It doesn't just deal with spending now. It also offers the prospect of dealing with an overspend that the executive has to deal with as well. So dealing with past debt and now allowing the executive to plan for the future in a range of public services which are desperately in need of that support.
It feels like a historic moment as well, because if Stormont does get back up and running, it's going to be with the first ever Sinn Féin First Minister. We've spoken to Sinn Féin's Mary-Lou McDonald on the programme. She says Irish unity is within touching distance, and she's told me that the days of Partition Ireland are numbered. Do you think she's right?
Well, that's what they want to achieve. It's something that I and many others do not believe or support. And, of course, opinion within the whole of the island of Ireland can be mixed on this. And certainly within Northern Ireland, where it really matters, we have communities there that want to be very much a part of the United Kingdom. Now, power sharing is a good and constructive thing. Sinn Féin have been at the top of government since the deal between Martin McGuinness and the late Ian Paisley back in 2007. So there's nothing new about this. What I think was different about the last few days is that the DUP have been convinced that there will be enough change in the way the Windsor framework operates in order to allow them now to come back into the executive. And I think that's important context here. If we can sort out some of the practical problems that businesses are experiencing in Northern Ireland and make sure that they feel very much part of our United Kingdom, our single market, our internal market, then that's not just good for unionists, it's good for the internal market of the UK.
Is there just a bit of a problem, though, with Brexit? Almost like an unsolvable problem when it comes to Northern Ireland. You don't want a border on the island of Ireland, understandably. You don't want a border in the Irish Sea, understandably. The EU also, understandably, wants a border with a non-EU country. I mean, how do you solve that?
Well, the truth is that there's no perfect solution to the irresistible force of the need to have a soft border in Ireland and the irresistible object of the single market needing to police its boundaries. You are always going to have this clash. I think now where we are with Windsor and now with these further adaptations, which we're going to hear more details about tomorrow, I think that we're in a substantially better position than we could have dared to imagine even only a few months ago.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Robert Butler there. Well, let's bring in our duo for tonight, the Conservative MP, Andrea Jenkyns, and the Labour MP, Dawn Butler. Great to have you both with us. It feels like we could be about to see the return of power sharing in Northern Ireland. Is there reasons for optimism, do you think, Dawn?
I think it's a good move. I mean, obviously, we have to wait until tomorrow to see the details. I understand that we may have a vote in Parliament on Thursday, and then Stormont might sit on Friday or Saturday and then elect a speaker. I think it's a good move. I mean, devolution came about under the last Labour government, so I think it's a good move.
How about you?
I mean, I was one of the 20 odd who was in the voting lobby voting against the Windsor framework, supporting the DUP at the time. So I think that, if it's good enough for the DUP, we do want to see them up and running in Northern Ireland again. I mean, that's what they was elected to do, wasn't it, to govern? So I think that's important. I would like to see the small detail, the fine print, though, to what it does mean for Brexit.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? We're commenting on something, well, we haven't. None of us have seen the details, so we're going to have to sort of see if it does pass the smell tester, if you like it, as well. But certainly positive noises coming out from all the different parties. I thought we could sort of widen it out a bit, because I guess I was kind of thinking, we're always told that Brexit's done, that all the aims of Brexit has been achieved, let's stop talking about it, let's move on. But if you look at what they're wrestling with in Northern Ireland, if you look at the immigration projections that we'll be talking about later on the programme, trade deals, European courts, it feels like there's a lot that's still on the to-do list. What would you say, Dawn?
But what does done actually mean? That's the thing, isn't it? Like, it needed to be quantified, right? What does done mean to different people? I mean, Boris Johnson said, oh, there'll never be a border. I remember that, you know, if there's any paperwork, bring it to me, I'll fill it in. It was all that bravado, wasn't it? And Brexit, you know, has not... I mean, what does done mean? Because it's been problematic from the moment, and people said it would be problematic for at least 15 years, and I think that's coming to pass.
I think it's been problematic, though, to be honest, Sophie, because, I mean, with respect, Dawn, we was on this panel during Brexit, arguing about Brexit. You was one of the MPs who tried to stop Brexit, as many other Remainers in Parliament.
You should rewind that and watch the show and see who was more right, I think.
Well,
it will be me. Let me just do a spoiler.
I think, but I think, look, we've got to be fair. I mean, Boris Johnson was elected to deliver on this, and then what happened? Not long after we officially came out of the EU, COVID happened. And I think that just really should have been our focus at the time, which it was. And look at how we tried to save so many people's livelihoods, etc. So the focus was quite rightly on that during that time.
Do you think it's then, like, if it hasn't achieved the aim so far, do you think that is because of external factors? Because
I do,
of COVID,
yes.
Or do you think that's actually because of politicians who haven't managed to, I guess, deliver on the will of the people, if you like?
I think it's a mixture of, well, both, in the fact that I think it's politicians across the Houses still trying to stop Brexit. We've seen people outside.
Though, isn't it?
No, not really. We've seen people who, you know, still taking to the streets, the Remainers who haven't accepted Brexit. We've seen institutions, we've seen civil servants. You know, when I was a minister myself, we've seen civil servants who are still trying to stop Brexit.
Can I think
and let me finish, and you'll have your turn.
We'll go to you, don't worry.
Dawn, as well. So I think it's a mixture, but let's not forget the impact of COVID. Sophie, I don't think really we've been given the chance to really embrace Brexit and the opportunities.
I think this is the problem with Brexit. This was a problem with it in the beginning. Like, you're trying to make it fit into a certain narrative and a certain box. The realities and the problems of Brexit isn't made up. We're living through it now. So it's not like, well, because of COVID, that's why there's going to be a border. No, this is the fact that's happening now. So you can't use that kind of pretense that you used before. And I think it's disingenuous to people as well to even try.
Do you think Rishi Sunak's, delivering on Brexit?
Well, I mean, I think he
believes in it.
I mean, they said he voted to leave, but I was the vote leave MP coordinator for the whole of Yorkshire, so I didn't see him campaign myself. I just think that circumstances of what happened globally with COVID, external factors, internal wranglings also within the party and with opposition MPs, I think really it's caused this knock-on effect to take our eye off delivering that, and I think that's very sad. And still, Dawn, I believe in democracy, and that was the democratic will of the British people. I respect that, and I'll always fight to it to this day.
It was the democratic will of the people. Brexit happened, but don't try and pretend that it's been a success or COVID had stopped it being a success.
Said like a true Remainer who's never accepted it.
It was never going to be a success. It's happened.
OK.
You've never accepted it, Dawn. You still haven't.
Get the feeling that we're not going to get any further on this debate. Thank you both very much for your comments. Much appreciated. Dawn and Andrea, more from you later on the programme if one of them doesn't walk off set. Anyway, a little bit earlier, I spoke to the president of Sinn Féin, that's Mary Lou McDonald. We can bring you that interview now. I began by asking what part the £3.3 billion package from the UK to Stormont played in getting the deal over the line.
Well, look, there has been a financial package agreed by the British government, by the Treasury, but just to be clear, the north of Ireland has been underfunded for a very, very long time. And although the headline figure of £3.3 billion sounds like a lot, the reality is that it is still going to be a huge, huge challenge to fund this place correctly, to keep public services up and running and at an appropriate standard. And that's before we talk about the very considerable infrastructural investment and development that's required. So be very clear that one of the first tasks, and I think it'll be an ongoing task for the new executive, will be to put the case to the British government to face down Tory austerity, but also to make the case for investment here. When you compare the north of Ireland to other places, the extent of the underfunding is actually remarkable, and in fact that point has been conceded by the British government, so we need to keep at that. The Irish government will be making a contribution here, and I mean ultimately the economic fortunes of this place, this island, our island economy is island-wide, so a big job of work to develop that, to attract investment, to generate quality jobs. But look, it's all work to be done, and at this stage I think everyone's looking forward to rolling up their sleeves and just getting cracking on all of that.
You said today that Irish unity is within touching distance. What did you mean by that?
Yes, exactly what I said. I think the significance, for example, of Michelle O'Neill coming in as the first Sinn Féin First Minister is just, I suppose, a clear emblem of the wider change that's happened right across Ireland. It's unmissable. It's here in the north, but it's echoed throughout the island. There's a conversation underway about what happens next 25 years, 26 years almost on from the Good Friday Agreement. What does Ireland look like in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in a generation's time?
What do you think?
That's a very exciting conversation.
What do you think it looks like in, say, 10 years' time? Do you think it looks like a united Ireland?
I do. I think the days of partition are numbered. It doesn't work. There's a cost to partition. We started our conversation. No, nothing in life is inevitable, although they say death and taxes come very close. There are no inevitabilities in political life, but I can tell you this much. We started our conversation talking about money, talking about funding this place, and the reality is that so long as Ireland is partitioned, we will face very, very significant economic challenges and disadvantages here in the north and all along the border corridor. The facts are that the big opportunities from our island, whether it's in terms of the climate catastrophe and renewable energies and how we develop that, our skills base, our innovation and research base, all of those things only make sense on an all-island basis if we're serious about grabbing big opportunities and really making our mark on the international stage, but perhaps more importantly, ensuring that we deliver the highest quality and standard of living for people right across the island.
I guess what I'm trying to get my head around is this. You know, you're saying today that because of what we've seen with the first Sinn Féin First Minister within touching distance, Irish unity is within touching distance. At the same time, the DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, is saying we've got legislation today that's protecting the Acts of Union, effectively saying this is all about bringing Northern Ireland closer to the rest of the United Kingdom. I mean, you can't both be right. Sometimes it feels as if, you know, you're kind of two parties grappling with the same problems, but looking in completely different directions on it. Who's right?
Well, we come at things from different perspectives. Here's the objective reality. The union continues only for so long as people consent to that. And equally, Irish reunification requires the democratic mandate by way of referendum by the people. So these are contested questions. This is a debated matter. You know this. I mean, this isn't new in Ireland. The desire for lots of us for reunification, for writing a new chapter for Ireland, others who value the union and who want to maintain the status quo. And the great genius of the Good Friday Agreement is that it gives ample room, democratic space for both. So we will be at an executive table working in common cause and common purpose with people with whom we have the most profound constitutional difference. But we have all signed up to the Good Friday Agreement, to the prospect of referendums, and then the people are sovereign and the people decide. And I feel incredibly confident that the conversation on reunification, as it develops and as we fully explore together the opportunities that present to us, that more and more people will arrive at the view that this is in the best and common interest. And can I say, in any reunified Ireland, we will have British people. You know, British people have their identity today. They'll be British in a unified Ireland. And part of our conversation amongst ourselves, but also with the British system, is how you accommodate and recognise that. So, but for today, we have a lot of work to do. We need to get the executive back up and running. There's lots of Assembly members elected, some of them brand new Assembly members who have never had the opportunity to take their seat and to make their democratic mark. So I think it's going to be really, really important for them and for the communities that have elected them that finally we get things back up and running. So it's a good news day from Belfast.
We're out of time, but just a very quick thought. Do you give Rishi Sunak any credit if he gets this over the line?
Well, I think in all fairness, today is probably a day for looking forward rather than looking back. I've actually been looking to meet Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, for quite some time, and he has evaded me thus far, but he will not evade me forever. Look, any British government needs to pay attention to Ireland, and I would dearly like the Tory government, the current administration, just to pay a bit more attention. Because we will get over this hurdle. But the funding issue that I mentioned earlier is absolutely critical. And if by any chance the British Prime Minister or anyone close to him is watching this, I would just put him on notice that this is a conversation that we will continue. And I hope that he will have a very willing and listening ear for us.
Sinn Féin's Mary Lou MacDonald speaking there. You're watching The Politics Hub. Coming up. Chancellor's spending plans are unrealistic, according to the IMF. So even if a tax cut could move the dial for the Conservatives, can Jeremy Hunt afford it?
Well, over the years, because of what happened to Ian, we've always managed to get involved in any kind of charities that support young men. I think, as you probably know, that the rate of suicide amongst young men up to the age of 24, 26 is tragically high still. Us men are still very bad at dealing with things and talking about it. So we've used the opportunity that Ian gave us, sadly, to be able to help as much as we can. And to be honest with you, as a musician, just playing at a fundraiser for anything is probably the easiest thing I can do in the world. I'm still very proud of what we've achieved as Joy Division musically. And to me, it's important that even though Ian's not here to share it with us, that we can use his legacy to try and educate and help as many men and women as we can to talk and to get help. The gig is very intimate, actually. It's 200 people. It's like going back to the old days. The Star and Garter is a very important venue in Manchester for up-and-coming bands. So, again, it's wonderful to help for that. The picture that Axie has put up on the wall was done by a wonderful guy called Philippe Carley, who's now a great Joy Division documentary. So we've managed to pull all these people in together. We're doing a Q&A. I've got Ian's best friend and the best man at his wedding helping me at the Q&A. I've also got Joy Division's first roadie, who's still my best friend of 45 years, Twinny, to answer some offbeat questions. I mean, people are used to me talking about Joy Division and also used to seeing my face and hearing my story. So I thought to get those two along will make it easier for me, and I'll be able to ask them some interesting questions as well.
Hello, welcome back. The International Monetary Fund has warned against further tax cuts and downgraded the UK economy in its latest assessment of the world economy. A cut, possibly to income tax, is expected to be a key part of the government's pre-election offer But the IMF said that rather than using the March budget to cut taxes, the Chancellor should boost key areas of public spending. Sky's economics editor Ed Conway has been crunching the numbers.
Of all the Prime Minister and Chancellor's priorities,
we can and we will cut taxes.
Now the right time for tax cuts, Chancellor.
Tax cuts are surely the most consistent and prominent.
In the autumn statement, we decisively cut taxes.
We do want to cut taxes more at future events.
But today, the world's biggest economic authority, the International Monetary Fund, warned that doing so was a bad idea.
We are projecting...
The chief economist saying that with all Britain's spending commitments in the coming years, they didn't see any room for cuts.
We would advise against further discretionary tax cuts.
At this point, you're probably wondering, what right does the IMF have to pass judgment on the UK? Well, it was all contained within their economic outlook, their latest update on the state of the global economy. And here, it wasn't just taxes, they were also looking at economic growth. This is showing you growth rates among the G7, so major economies around the world. The higher the bars are, the faster the growth. The UK was the weakest growing one, but this update, so the latest update, shows that Germany has been downgraded. UK unchanged at 0.6%, but Germany downgraded, so that is the weakest this year. Next year, the UK was kind of high up in this table, relatively high up. It has now been downgraded, so down from 2% to 1.6%. But it's those comments on taxation that are perhaps most striking. And here the point from the IMF is, this is the tax burden in the UK. The government wants to bring that down, and the fund thinks that's not very realistic. And why? It's because of spending. So this is showing you current spending, and the government's expecting spending to come down quite quickly, but the fund thinks it might stay quite high. Here's what the Chancellor has to say about it, though. He says it's too early to know whether further reductions in tax will be affordable in the budget, but we continue to believe that smart tax reductions can make a big difference in boosting growth. However, outside experts say there's simply not much room.
It's difficult to see how those pressures go away over the next 5 years. So my guess is if there are tax cuts this year, they will be undone after the next election, whoever wins that election.
No one quite knows when the election will be, but no one doubts the economy will play a part. The government's pitch is to put more money back into the public's pockets, but the IMF reckons that path simply isn't open to them. Ed Conway, Sky News.
You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. In the aftermath of the sentencing of the Nottingham killer, Baroness Newlove tells me the Victims' Bill making its way through Parliament has no teeth, and she calls for more powers for the Victims' Commissioner. That is next. Hello, welcome back. The mother of murdered student 19-year-old Barnaby Webber, who was killed in the Nottingham attacks, said that true justice has not been served after her son's killer was given a hospital order for manslaughter by diminished responsibility. Well, today the Attorney General ordered a review into that decision, and it comes as the Victims and Prisoners Bill is making its way through Parliament. I spoke to the Victims Commissioner, Baroness Newlove. Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's a real privilege to be able to speak to you, and I know how passionate you are about this sort of issue as well. I just wanted to talk a little bit at the beginning about the Nottingham attacks, because we've seen the family of Barnaby, one of the young victims who died, call for a public inquiry. The killer was given a hospital order for the deaths of 3 people. And the families are unhappy about, a lot. They're unhappy about the sentencing. They're unhappy about the way that they feel that they were treated throughout. Do you have sympathy for what they've been going through?
Completely. I can't even put it into words myself. And as Victims Commissioner, I can't say anything or get involved in an individual case, but I'm not speaking. I'm speaking as Helen Newlove, who went, through the court system. And this is why I'm sat here, so passionate about it, to listen to the families. I've got huge sympathy for them. I just, every day the story's changing. And, this isn't a story that'll go away out the papers. This is a lifelong journey they're going to go through. So, yes, for me, it really is. Just shows you that we believe a system's there to protect people and you understand the victim's journey. But actually, it shows you these families feel very left. And I would imagine, as I said when I lost Gary in 2007, when my daughters witnessed his death, as a mother, you want to protect your children and I want to wrap them with cotton wool and take away that pain. And so I really do feel and sympathy and everything for that family. And they're so dignified as well. So, and that's the bit that's, they're being very balanced in all of this. And yet they've lost their children in horrific circumstances.
Is there anything in particular that they've been saying that speaks to you, that you think, actually, that's a really good point, or I really understand what they're saying there?
I think, for me, it's about decisions being made without them being fully understood, and they had no control over that. And, if it's true, they were told on a Friday that the charges were going to be reduced to manslaughter. It's something I've said from day one, never tell a victim information on a Friday. You don't know how mental states they're already in. And it's a big conversation to have. Let them digest it and come back with questions. So for me, yes, again, that, you're sitting there, people are doing their jobs, and but you have no voice. And it's that voice that has been silenced, and you come out and you're expected to just accept it.
I feel like sometimes when I speak to people who've been victims, or the families who've been victims of these horrific crimes, they feel like the system is too much rigged towards the perpetrator and not enough focused on the victim. Do you think there's truth in that?
There is a lot of truth in that, because you believe there's a system there. A majority of families, they follow the rule of law, they go through the courtroom, you're told how to behave, what you must do, what you mustn't do. And for me, it's about understanding that actually we should have a level playing field. And we always presume families understand what the legal, arena's like. It isn't, if you don't work in it, you don't understand what's going on.
By a level playing field, do you mean between victim and perpetrator? Do you mean people who have money and who don't have money? What do you mean by level playing field?
Well, I could say a lot about money, you don't have money. But if you think about, in an example of our case, there was 5 QCs, or KCs as they're called now. So there's a lot of professionals in there. But for victims, and, I'm working on the Victims and Prisoners Bill in the House of Lords, it's about, we hear that they want to be the centre of the criminal justice system, victims. Well, they don't. They want the level playing field, so that we all get the communication, we all understand, so that not one side saying you can't do this, you can't do that. Treat victims with dignity and respect, and give them time to digest information while they're traumatised, they're grieving, and the system the wheel just goes round, and it expects people to fit in. It is not a one-size-fits-all, and we should respect people, because it's the loneliest place, Sophie, when the trial's over and the sentencing and everything else. It's the most loneliest place to be in.
Do you mind talking a little bit about your own experience? Because I remember your story so well, what happened, but there might be people who aren't familiar with it. Do you want to to talk a little bit about what
Yeah,
happened
I mean,
in your
I
family?
can't believe it's 17 years this year, but in 2007, my late husband, Gary Newlove, was murdered by a gang of youths. He was kicked and punched to death, all in front of my 3 young daughters who were 12, 15 and 18 at the time. And, you know, it's just like we've been saying with the families where they looked on a phone app to see if it was about them. I was being told to call for an ambulance and thinking it was somebody else who was injured. You know, and I had to turn Gary's life support machine off 2 days later. And your life is completely shattered. And while, you know, you're going through that system, and and my daughters were giving witness statements, they were the heroines, I called them, in all of this, was when the courtroom treated Gary as a piece of evidence. And my 18-year-old Zoe at the time, who appeared in court, albeit screened, you know, she's never forgot how they showed a map where Gary was man A and the offenders were man B, you know, BC. And it's about humanising. So when I you know, after a 10-week court trial and waiting for sentencing, and 2 were acquitted, for me it was always about, no, they're not a statistic for the criminal justice agencies to mark and percentage. These are human lives that we can never get back. So I really feel for these families, I really do.
And you fought since then, for
Yes.
17 years, for victims to be listened to be respected throughout the
Yeah, and it
process.
seems quite simple to say, doesn't it? You know, but it isn't, well, because you don't have any rights. Victims have no rights whatsoever. They have no legal representative. The prosecutor isn't for victims, he's for the state. And when they're making decisions about your loved one, about thresholds or whatever, have the decency to sit with the family, face the family, and work it out with them, because they were so respectful on the steps. They understood the mental health, but what they couldn't understand was what was happening around them, where they couldn't have any time. And as I say, to me, it shows you how the system really doesn't work for victims, and just takes it for granted that, well, it's done now and off we go again.
So what do you make then of the Victims and Prisoners Bill that is progressing through the House? Is it strong enough?
No, as it is, it's not strong enough. It's very weak. It has no teeth in that sense. But what I'm really delighted that we're having an opportunity to put it in legislation. Now, let's remember, legislation is for the professionals. So for me, as Victims Commissioner, and as I've said in the Chamber last week, I'm also here as Helen Newlove to bring all them voices that I've heard all over the years to make sure that, you know, we have accountability, we have accessibility to support victims through the criminal justice system. And as it stands, it has no teeth. So the Victims Commissioner, not me, I am at the moment, but I'm not looking for, you know, I'm not begging for the continue. What I'm saying is the person who takes the role over needs to have the tools and the powers to be able to make sure the criminal justice agencies are compliant with everything that should be given to victims.
You say it has no teeth. What needs to change then?
It needs to give the Victims Commissioner the same powers as the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, in that you look across and mark, instead of the agencies and Ministry of Justice and the police marking their own homework, is actually the compliance is down to the Victims Commissioner. So to look at what's being out there, what is being supported, what is failing, because it's too much of people marking their own homework. And also making sure that the code of practice that it is now is actually put onto the face of the bill. And what I mean, it should be in the bill, so that, you know, they do have access to services, they do get communicated properly, they do understand what support systems are out there. Because as it stands now, the code is just seen as persuasive guidance. So unless you have legal rights in a legal system, none of professionals will stand up and do anything for it if you don't make it by law.
So what's your message then to the Prime Minister, to Rishi Sunak?
Well, I've said it in the Chamber. It has no teeth. It's very weak. It came in that thin in the House of Lords. I have to say I don't like the title because it's victims and prisoners. And, you know, for me, apparently it's a technicality, Sophie, that, you know, it's in there. But I'm not interested. It is a victims bill, but it's a work in progress. And also we've got to make sure that we give much support, understanding, and treat victims with dignity and respect. And as Victims Commissioner, I will keep on championing that and make sure we get some teeth in that bill, because otherwise it's not worth the paper it's written on.
Baroness Newlove there, really not holding back to express her opinion on the Victims and Prisoners Bill. Now, Today, the Home Secretary set out the timetable for when the government would bring in tighter restrictions on immigration. The tougher rules were announced late last year. They include measures like care workers no longer being able to bring dependents and increases to the base salary to be sponsored as a skilled worker. That's all going to be rolled out from this spring. It should be fully in effect by early next year. Well, it comes as the Office for National Statistics release their population estimates for the UK for the next decade or so. Now, they project that the UK population will reach around 74 million by 2036. That's up nearly 7 million on the current level. And they estimate that around 6 million of the rise will be accounted for by net migration. We can bring in our panel. We can chat to Andrea and Dawn. Dawn, how do you feel about the kind of population projections? Are you relaxed about it? Do you think it could be a good thing for our economy? Are you worried about it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think the report also talks about people living longer. So you're going to have people going to be in their late 80s, and there's the birth rate as well that's going to increase. At the end of the day, net migration adds to the economy something like £26.5 billion net, positive net contribution to the economy. So there's lots that we have to talk about in that figure.
What's your take?
I agree with what Suella and Robert Jenrick said, and we haven't got, the democratic mandate for this. And I'm really concerned, Sophie, about the effect on the community, the look at doctor surgeries, schools. Everything's already stretched as it is, and how we're going to cope with another, there's another 7 million people. We're not.
A lot of people coming in to work as doctors, nurses, care workers. We have a shortage of skills in our country. Our economy is a people economy. It's based on work. It's based on migrant workers. That's what our economy is based on. Yes, we need to train more people also in our country, but that's actually what our economy is based on. When people can't get a doctor's appointment, it's because we don't have enough doctors because we have lots of shortages.
But it's not 7 million people of these high-skilled jobs that will be coming across, and we need to get our own British people out working more, we need to really upskill our economy to make sure that, the Britain's future and the next generation, they're better equipped. So rather than importing people, I think, Dawn, with respect with your attitude to migration, clearly it's going to be worse under Labour and a lot higher under Labour.
What is my attitude?
Well, you're talking completely about the benefits, but what about the communities? Surely there's some of your communities...
So are you saying there are no benefits?
No, of course I'm not. There's clearly benefits to migration when it's...
So who has to adjust their attitude?
No.
You, not me.
No, because I see in my area of Morley and outward how it's difficult to get a doctor's appointment. It's difficult to get a dentist appointment.
Because there's a shortage of doctors and there's a shortage of dentists, and the government has not invested in making sure that doctors are trained.
Or maybe because a lot of them are on strike, which is...
Or maybe a lot of them
a Labour-type policy. You are the unions are backed by Labour and vice versa.
Do you know what? This is such a ridiculous argument.
Oh, really?
Trade unions are the aspirational vehicles of the working class.
Oh, okay.
So the doctors,
the
doctors are on strike because they haven't been paid.
But I lost my
they haven't
mum.
been paid.
Rubbish. No.
They haven't been.
I lost my mum during a strike.
No, this is really important.
This is important to me because I lost my mum during a strike, and she was soaked in her own urine, and because they was out on the picket line. I'm sorry,
okay.
but how many other relatives have been through that? That is wrong, Dawn.
So I'm sorry that you've lost your mum, but
they shouldn't be striking. Frontline people in the NHS should not be striking.
The fact is this: the doctors have taken an oath, right? And even though they were
even though
they were on strike, they made sure there were people in the doctors and in the hospitals.
Well, it wasn't covered enough. Why did my mum die then?
I don't know, and
Yes,
maybe we can talk to your hospital about that. But to try and paint doctors in this way is absolutely, and the way that your government has spoken about doctors and nurses and treated doctors and nurses is a disgrace.
The way you back unions, it was actually the way Labour backed these unions, who actually is trying to stop the economy, is a disgrace.
I'm going to come in.
Yes.
High feelings. I can absolutely say that, and we can talk about this more in the break. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch is apparently in a WhatsApp group called Evil Plotters. Yet that's the same Kemi Badenoch who, at the weekend, told Conservative Party rebels to stop stirring. We're talking rebellion by WhatsApp. That's next.
The pound has rallied, moderation, interest rates peaking.
I'm up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, plotting in Parliament used to happen late at night, in smoke-filled rooms. But these days, most political rebellions are fomented on WhatsApp. Now, there is a group for every Tory tribe, from the ERG support group to the One Nation caucus. And we learned today that there's even a group called Evil Plotters. Now, among its members is the Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, all the more surprising since at the weekend she told plotters trying to oust Rishi Sunak to stop stirring. Well, let's bring in Andrea and Dawn, plus the very special guest. Who have we got here?
Guinevere. We lost our dog before Christmas, Sophie, and my little boy, Clifford, she saw her die. She had a heart attack and has been heartbroken. So Guinevere's here to bring light into his life.
And to bring a bit of calm and happiness to proceedings as well.
Therapy dog.
Absolutely gorgeous scene stealer, I have to say. I'm going to ask you about the WhatsApp groups, though, as well. Evil Plotters. What's going on? Are they actually evil plotters?
Oh, it's quite a cool name, though, isn't it?
It is. I like the name.
Well, I mean, I'm hearing that the left of the party, the One Nation, are plotting as well. I'm hearing that on good authority. And let's face it, Kemi was in the group who was also trying to oust Boris at the time, if you remember. Her WhatsApps got leaked where she was saying, come on, resign to all the other ministers. So I'm not surprised to hear this, to be honest with you.
And you've gone on the record saying you want Rishi Sunak out, you want a replacement. Yes. Would you like to see Kemi Badenoch come through the ranks?
Oh, God, no, definitely not, no. I mean, Kemi, in Parliament, she's known as a great pretender. Because if you look at her voting record, it's not like the rhetoric. She's great on the wokey stuff, but she voted for Theresa May's deals, she voted for more net zero, so she's not like she says she is.
Dawn, you in any evil plotting WhatsApp groups?
Well, I think, like, just letting the Tories do their thing, you know, the Conservatives, exactly what it says on the tin, you know, evil plotters, I can believe that. But I tell you what's funny is that we have a dining room in Parliament, and I've noticed, like, on a Wednesday, that they're spread out more. So there's so many of you not talking to each other that they're taking up a lot more room.
Talking about WhatsApp, obviously. I love it. So you're very angelic then. No naughty WhatsApp groups.
I mean, look
at
what
all.
happened to one of your MPs, though. You know, at the weekend about signing the Holocaust memorial book. So it's not all good in your party.
That is all us. And that's all from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7, and I'm going to go and have a cuddle with this gorgeous lady as we go. I'm out. You too.